Welcome to today's session for the Practitioner Researcher Series. I'm delighted to have with us today Ivan Young, who is a major contributor to our field of coaching and a key ambassador for EMCC Global, and particularly the Asia Pacific region, where he kind of serves in presidential roles, and is also an important contributor to the research in our field and developing our work in terms of particular aspects of coaching, such as, for example, corporate innovation, and has paid a lot of attention to AI and its increasing role, as well as some of its downsides. So, welcome, Ivan.
Thank you, David, for the invitation. Actually, I'm just an honor and pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Thanks. Okay, could we start perhaps, Ivan, with talking a bit about your career before coming into coaching?
Sure. I actually graduated with a mechanical and production engineering degree from the Nanyang Technical University of Singapore. So my first job was really making asthma drugs for a big pharma in Singapore. And I was making asthma drugs. These are all what we call RX drugs. So these are prescription drugs. So drugs that are newly found
Yeah.
that has yet to go over the counter. So it's expensive, and you deal with a lot of poison because the main ingredient is steroids. And I realized at that point already that it's important to be able to coach people. So because I run the production crew,
Yeah.
and before I start any production for the week, I always have a conversation with my
Right.
team, and I normally will not choose a person that's either too happy if you have won a football bet over the weekend, or someone is too sad, they had an argument with wife. So I do not let them do the critical part of the operation.
Yeah.
So I want someone even killed to do the most critical part of the operation, which is to mix the non-active and active to become a drug.
Hmm.
So I learned that very early on because you get someone too happy, he'll be sloppy. You get to one
Yeah.
so sad, he will be sloppy as well. So that's when I really realized about the power of coaching actually, and then
Hmm.
mentoring after that.
Yeah.
And then I then decided that I wanted to I was sent to the US because I was doing quite well for them, and but I turned it down. And my boss asked me, "What do you want to do?" I say, "I want to go. I want to have one day have my own business."
Yeah.
And then he say, "Why don't you just go back to uni? You'll pay for your degree." I say, "I don't think you can learn how to do business in a business school."
Right.
And I went and became a salesman. I started selling SAPs, ERP systems, got very successful in that. Then moved on to Hong Kong, and I started selling psychometric tools to China.
Hmm.
This was in the early 2006 when psychometric tools is a very new thing in Asia, and it's even more novel in China. So I started bringing that to China, and again, I saw the importance of coaching because psychometric tools allow you to do selection and recruitment.
Mm.
It also allow you to do development work, but then it just give a feedback based on a objective survey, but there's no follow-up after that. So, normally I get question like, so I now know my strength and weaknesses. So what should I do? So at that point, really coaching should come in because then you get someone to coach you and you explore your weaknesses and all that. So I saw then that's when I began to actually got involved in coaching and mentoring work. Um, then I also then got built my career over sales. I helped another Belgian company to build businesses out here in Asia Pacific. So that's probably will be some of the work I've been doing in a nutshell, actually. And then I have my own practice, which is doing coaching around psychometric tools, using psychometric tools as the first base, and then we then do coaching on top of that. And parallelly, I also begin to invest into startup as angel investors. So there's a lot of the coaching, especially in business development, business and sales coaching begins with a startup because eventually, when we invest in a startup as angel investors, what we are looking for is not at the business model. It's really not that much of the technology as well, but it's the founder that we're looking at. And then we are investing in a person, a human, and we are looking for someone who's willing to be mentored or coach, so to speak. And so along the way of that, we actually we have a few startups that have gone very successful. Actually, in fact, I recently helped one startup, advise and coach the startup. Begin 18 months ago, where they failed to get into a startup program from a university program. They failed.
Mhm.
They came to me And I gave them a challenge. I say, look, I don't want, if you want me to help, then my condition is that you should not be applying for the grant anymore. You
Hmm.
should take this and go to the market and see if there's legs to it. And
Right.
then we work on it, and then and now they are valued at 50 million RMB worth of
Yeah.
valuation. Yeah, it's just 18 months. Of
Mhm.
course, they have now other challenges because now the AI technology has
Yeah.
now improved so much to 18 months ago, they had the technology that no one can do. Then become important. But
Yes.
now 18 months later, now what they developed 18 months ago has now become a common tool already because of
Mhm.
agentic AI
Yeah.
coming in. So AI is really interesting because it moves so fast. But in the same time, your fortune can change over time very fast as well. I mean, these two founders, they were very adamant, they were very keen, they were very willing to be coached, but they were rejected.
Yes.
But then, but if you coach them again, well, between 18 months, they've made a company that's valued at 50 million RMB. That's the more latest work that I've done so far.
Mm. So, in fact, you kind of came into coaching really as an internal coach initially before we had such a thing. And
Yes, yeah,
actually, because you saw the power of coaching to make a difference.
yes, because it's always dealing with human. Even when we're doing sales, especially like more solution-based sales. For example, coaching is a solution-based sales because
Yeah.
you do not see the effect. It's a conceptual sales as well, I would say, because you do a sales coaching, you do a coaching, you sell a coaching service, you do a coaching, but the effect or the benefit of that impact comes 6 months or 12 months down the road when our coachee then make new achievement. Then the transformative work they were working towards becomes a reality. That's much, much down the road, actually.
Mm.
You cannot hold that success on your hand like an iPhone when you
Yeah.
buy it.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's where I find it really interesting because it's all about the person. Even the startup that's worth 50 million RMB today
Yeah.
is also about two individuals, and the power
Yes.
of coaching I think comes in, very strongly in all
Yeah.
these areas. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned kind of corporate innovation, these organization building. I mean, your book on coaching strategies for corporate innovation was really
Mm.
interesting. So I wonder if you can talk a bit about what that book's about, but then perhaps consider how you built that book, from the evidence base, from your own experience, from case study, etc.
Yeah. So first of all, David, thank you for believing in the book because you were one of the first 2% when I approached you and you believe in the book. And the book Coaching Strategies for Corporate Innovation comes from a time when, right before COVID, there was a lot of words about corporate venturing. So corporates, big companies were buying the technology from the startups. It's called corporate innovation. So they're buying innovative technology and they try to absorb it into their company. So a lot of big companies were doing it for the period of time. Today, corporate venturing is still a very big project. That's how the corporate innovation officers and all that they are always constantly looking at technology and startups that they can collaborate with. And it is true that when some of our startups begin to engage with corporate, they come to us and they have all these problems, right? Because your startup has a more fast culture. They need to make decision fast. Whereas the corporate has time on their hand. They don't need to make decision fast. The startup is running on a low cash flow, almost running out of cash flow. But the
Yeah.
corporate has time to, because it's not their own company, they can still wait along and they can do a deck of pitch deck. They can do a slide for 50 slides deck and 50 slides kind of PowerPoint. But the startup can afford those kind of time. And that's when we realize that the approach that they do is right, they look at the technology first. They do not look at these cultural differences between the startups, the
Right. Yeah.
founders, and then we begin to see, and as we coach our startup to engage with the corporate, we also begin to talk to the corporate, and we realize that this discrepancy into it. That's
Hmm.
when the idea of the coaching strategies of corporate innovation came about. So what we did was we map out the process that is happening, and then we look at in which intersection we should come in and we should coach and also mentor, or what sort of framework that we can bring at what stages. So instead of having one single framework that push all the process into the framework, force feed into the framework, what we're having now is a process driven process. It's driven by the process. So in the initial part, maybe what the startup need is mentoring, and what
Mm.
the corporate need is coaching, then we do that. So the second part, when it comes to cultural differences, maybe that's when they should do team coaching together. Then we introduce something like that. And also thank you, David, for your for introducing us to formulation in coaching. I think that's actually a very practical way of doing things. I find that initially when I was looking at solution and also at the how to write the book, I was doing a lot of journal reading. I realized that a lot of journals are about their own models and templates, and
Yeah,
it just can't fit. The process can't fit at all because the corporate is having there's two party to this process and not just one single party.
yeah.
And so that's where I find that formulation is very powerful. And some of these other things that we introduced at the different stage of the process actually it became quite. It also opened up my mind because, like I say, oh, if those days we have known about this
Right.
would have been it would have made the conversation much easier and the collaboration much easier as well.
Mm. This series is really here to try and help practitioners think about their own practice and how to research their own practice. So I wonder if you can talk a bit
Mm.
about, in terms of the corporate innovation book, how you
Mm.
brought together experience, literature, case studies to actually build the framework for the book.
So the key thing is really the experience with the process. So what I've done is I have to use the process as the base of the framework, not the
Mhm.
framework, but the base. So
Yeah.
the process, everything is driven by the process. So by the practice. So the startup or the corporate, when they collaborate, they will go through all these processes. At one stage of time, they will come to this stage, and the next stage will happen. They will all go through that. So I use that as the base to write the book, and then I begin to research because there's so many ways of coaching. There's some formulation, there's mentoring, and there's coaching. I begin to look at how some of the available research or literature allows me to see which coaching practice that already has evidence that I can deploy at that stage.
Mhm.
And of course, when I do that, when I look at that, I also think back of the experience that we had while we were doing that, that coaching that was done before. And from there, I look at what is much more suitable, that's much more evidence-based. So
Mhm.
then I look at how, and I compare that, and then I deploy which is a way better one, which is much more research-based with data, and I wrote that in the book. So
Mhm.
case study comes also because of some of the case study we mentioned in the book is based on our own experience. Some of the problems that the startups came to us at a certain stage of their collaboration with the corporate, and some we look at more bigger case studies from the available source
Yeah.
in the internet. But the key ones are mainly experience that we had in with our own startups or that came to us for coaching while they were collaborating with a corporate.
Yeah. You're using that combination of kind of reflection on your own experience and what you can
Mm.
learn from that, as well as then reflecting on what the evidence base looks like out there. So you're kind of drawing upon both of those.
Yes, yes, because the experience one is at that time when we were doing it 3, 4 years ago, we didn't really depend too much on research-based work, but we were doing a lot from experience.
Hmm.
And then when I do a reflection again, when I wrote the book, I realized that if I had some of this knowledge today, some of this research literature that I read today, and I deployed it, then it would be much more effective.
Yeah.
And that drives the writing content of the book.
Mm.
Like for example, in startup, there's this concept of pivoting. So pivot means you originally started with an idea and you try to build a product for the idea, but then you find that it's not working, and you try to pivot into something that is newer, but not going far away from what was your original
Right.
idea. So
Yeah.
example would be if your original idea is to do pet food, and you pivot into pet drugs, but you don't
Yes.
go into pet food, you go into human food. So
Yeah.
that pivoting is very, we find that pivoting conversation initially when we go into collaborate with the corporate, the startup thinks there's no such thing as pivoting, they're just buying my technology.
Yeah.
What happened in reality is the corporate are also pivoting because they need to bring your technology in to fit to some of their lines of products, and they need you to pivot as well, right?
Mm.
You have a technology in pet food, but we are doing pet drugs. I need you to pivot a little bit that to pet
Yeah.
supplement. So and that becomes then how do you coach the startup to pivot and the corporate to pivot together to come to to come to a agreement that this is the new technology that we both can use in this collaboration. And that's when coaching comes quite interestingly. If coaching, you can coach them to think about pivot, how they pivot, but both must share a common goal.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
that makes it very
That
interesting.
kind of shared purpose is critical, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Now, I see behind you the book Pandora's Pivot, as we're talking about pivoting. But also,
Mm.
Ken, I read that and I was so impressed with it. At Christmas, we do quizzes for our family. All the family come and we do quizzes. And I made Pandora's Pivot one of the prizes in the quiz. For,
Thank you so much. Yeah.
but it's actually a very unusual book. I mean, your approach to that book is really kind of pretty unique. So I wonder if you could tell me why you took the particular approach to writing that book.
Well, thank you so much for that. And what I wanted to do was, I wanted to make business books more interesting.
Mm,
You just don't read the concept, you just don't
yeah,
read the technical about AI, and it becomes boring. And I wanted to write something interesting from storytelling first. You draw a lesson from the story, and then we go into the psychology bit of it, and then we look at how we can solution to the problem. And Pandora Pivot is because I imagine Pandora deciding to close the jar, and she pivoted because she realized that the jar is bad for humanity, and she pivoted and she closed the jar.
yeah.
And but then the book is essentially, what I wanted to do is explain AI concepts to non-technical people.
Mm,
And when I wrote the book 18 months ago, agentic AI, the description about agentic AI was found only in white papers.
mm,
So it's not widely available. And I happen to be reading all these white papers, what's coming next, what's coming next. So interestingly, for example, vibe coding is already a passé now, it seems.
yeah,
So, but it was not, it was just a while ago you can wipe code and you wipe
yeah.
out all the works for programmers. But now there's a new thing coming up that makes wipe coding already a passé.
Mm,
And so when I wrote 18 months ago about agentic AI, it was not out in the open yet, but I predicted some
yeah.
agentic AI, and I imagined Pandora as the agent because she has agency. She can
Mm,
decide to do what she wants to the jar, how long to open it, when to close it, all entirely on her own without
mm,
any interception from Zeus or anybody.
mm,
So AI is like that. Agentic AI would be like that. We tell them something, we get an outcome, and then suddenly you're no longer in the loop of decision making
mm,
because it's just purely, you gave an instruction, outcome, then you're no longer involved. Humans are no longer involved in the loop of decision
mm,
making.
mm,
So I'm trying to use all these Greek mythology to then tell all the major concepts about AI. But then I threw myself a challenge. I say, what other gods I want to use? And
yes.
all those gods and goddess I want to use must have something related to Pandora.
Yeah.
So then that start me thinking, okay, what other next after agent AI, what other things I want to talk about? The AI, I want to talk about neural networks. I
Mm,
want to talk about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and then I find ways to fit the story back into the explain the concept. Yeah. So that's how it came about, actually.
yeah. It actually makes you say you want to make the books more interesting. It actually made for a very interesting read, how you kind of went back between different Greek myths and the discussion of AI. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So, so
discussion of leadership. Yeah.
So this is leadership. So my publisher is asking me to write a third book, and they asked me whether there's a third book or not. We did a launch in Hong Kong, and the publisher came, and I told him, actually, I already saw a third book in my mind. So the first book I wrote was an Egyptian one, so it's a Pharaoh's pitch.
Mm,
It's about how you can do sales and sales coaching, but told from the Egyptian history. And then I
yeah.
have Greek. So the third one, David, I'm looking at a red book,
Mm.
and it's going about Roman legionnaires. And then we can talk about team.
Yeah.
But then I'm not writing it now because I want to wait for the time when agentic AI goes into team. So
Mm,
imagine now, right? I think next 12 months, we might be talking about you having a teammate who is an agentic AI.
mm, Yeah.
And how do you collaborate with this agentic AI? So imagine we have a sales team, you have an agentic AI as one of your sales member, and you have a sales team doing work together. And how do you work with this agentic AI? Imagine a HR department suddenly have an agentic AI here who is one of your team member, or the finance department. Now you have two or three
Mm.
agents working for
Yeah.
you, but they are not human. But how
Yeah.
does a human interact with these agents? And so the third book is going to be about Romans Legionnaires. Basically, I'm talking
Yeah.
about teams, but I
Yeah.
want to wait for the time when you have an agent in your
Yes.
team, and then we collect case studies from
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So that's something that's I'm just imagining it now. I haven't done
Sure.
anything about, but
Yeah.
it could be happening actually, and we can collaborate or something like that actually. It could be an
Absolutely.
interesting
Yeah.
first wave that we can be doing actually,
Mm.
because and then we can do it, and then we can do some research, we can do some consulting, and then we can get some case study back. Then that book will be much more richer because if not, then it will be very predictive in nature, I would say.
Yeah.
That's where the researcher comes in. I think one of the key thing I find that EMCC has made me do well as a practitioner is that this element of research.
Mm.
I'm looking at how to make it better. So imagine if we do that agentic AI consulting or work or something like that, and then we get some result. We need to look at how can we do that better. How can we then coach humans to work better with agents?
Yeah. Okay. Let's explore that a bit then. So, kind of, um, how do you see the kind of world of AI impacting on the way we coach? And then subsequently, how do you see the world of AI helping us to research our practice in coaching?
Okay, I think first of all, a lot of so we did a short AI research last year with EMCC research, which I won, and we did a quick one. So the topic of my research was, is AI a friend or foe to coaches? And from the data that we get is a lot of senior coaches are using AI.
Yeah.
But the less not so experienced coaches are more afraid of hesitant about AI. They feel they get replaced. But the senior ones, they're all open to using it for example, transcription and all that. But a lot of it is done for the administrative work part of
Right.
coaching.
Yeah.
But I begin to see that now a lot of the AI companies are approaching me or even some of the EMCC coaches about AI chatbots
Yeah.
and AI, agentic AI, not so much, but AI chatbot. So one of the things that I can foresee happening is one AI chatbot quickly become an assistant to the coach. And what does that mean is that in the past, I mean, there was a discussion of as we as coaches, should we take note or not? Or
Mm.
should we just
Yeah.
focus on the coaching? That's just one area of this. Everybody talks about it a
Yeah.
lot. Like we shouldn't take note. No, we don't have to worry about the past. But AI chatbot will allow us, if our coachee is agreement for the recording, the AI chatbot will learn the behavior of the coachee based on the conversation, and they will have a record of it.
Yeah.
And then you can then, as a coach, you can then work with this AI chatbot or even now agentic AI to then look at what has transpired over after post coaching session and then help you prepare for the next coaching session.
Mm.
So that could be a powerful thing because
Yeah.
if we handle a lot of customers or coachee, we cannot remember everybody and we rely on notes.
Yes.
But this AI now begin to learn about our coaches based on the conversation that we have.
Mm.
And then you can even then ask this AI coach or agent, what would you suggest I explore with the coachee? So this is also the crux of my PhD work that I'm trying to do now as a PhD candidate for University of Nottingham, Malaysia. It's like I'm looking at the question that interests me was wisdom in coaches. So,
Mhm.
for example, when you coach me, David, you will know, oh, I'll tell you about my family, I tell you about my wife, I tell you about my pet. But somehow through the wisdom, you realize that, oh, we should deep dive into the pet.
Mm.
Not what he says about his family, not about his wife, but what we should deep dive into the pet. And when he talk about his pet, I think we should deep dive. There's something there, and that comes from the wisdom that you had as an experienced coach.
Yeah.
Now, then my question is there a way for AI that can train our coaches to be wiser faster without clocking hours? So that's became got me interested to do a PhD.
Yeah.
And one of the things I can look at it powerfully is, I mean, I'm just speculating here, but I'm
Sure.
just predicting as well. Now we are accrediting coaches by the hours that they clock,
Yeah.
like a pilot.
Yeah.
But what if he's wise enough? He can just be wise, then, or he or she is super wise. He can
Yeah.
do it with half the time. But
Yeah.
also, are we accrediting for hours
Mhm.
of effort,
Yes.
or are we accrediting for wisdom of a coach? So this got me really interested in how AI can do that. And so that's where I'm looking at how AI can help coaches and how it would change coaches' way of doing things going forward. I hope that it can help coaches to be wiser, uh, faster, and to get that coaching effect about quicker.
Yeah. Great. So that's how kind of AI can help us as coaches. What about coaches who want to research their practice? In what ways might AI help them to research?
So I think for at the moment, there is enough tools for AI to help you do literature review. That's one thing.
Yeah.
Is so powerful. You can do so many things with it in a quick time. And this kind of AI is more kind of like a because AI is very powerful as a data mining and then data analysis. And if you don't rely too much on the generative part of it, it's actually a very powerful tool because it can quickly analyze a whole lot of database for you, and those tools are already available.
Yeah.
But what I find could be interesting is, of course, now I'm still at literature review in my
Yeah.
PhD
Yeah.
candidacy, but then I'm already thinking about how to go and deploy the research work. And I think AI can be a tool to be deployed for a lot of the research work that we're doing. Example would be, say, if you're doing a qualitative research,
Yeah.
and if the AI can be deployed to help us to look at and do the coding and do the how do you gather the data, how do you do the coding, I think that can be a very powerful tool, number one. And if in the event somehow you can build a research method that allows that we are allowed to collect the conversation with the coachee into AI, that AI then it really can learn about the coachee,
Hmm.
or you can learn about the question and it then give you a back, from their analysis of what they saw. You can even then from the conversation, you can even see how the coach has getting closer to the transformative that he or she
Yeah.
based on the conversation that we have. And that can be analysis as well. And I think those are the tools like so you can how can you deploy AI uh, during the research conversation, especially for qualitative research and also post research. What can you learn from the research work? I think this could be a powerful use of AI, which I'm currently exploring with the available tools at this moment. But tomorrow something might change. it
Yeah.
could it
Yeah.
could
Sure.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, technology. Yeah.
What would you put any warnings against it for people using AI for their research?
I think one of the biggest challenges because if you it relies a lot on your prompt.
Mm.
And so there's all these AI tools out there that do research. They tell me, okay, tell us what you want to do, and then we go and create the research, and then we generate the summary for you.
Yeah.
But that's the problem because if I just because I already know what I know to prompt,
Yeah.
and then I'll miss out on what is relevant, but it's not within my knowledge.
Yes.
And the whole purpose of research is to go and find knowledge. I mean, like my supervisor asked me to read journals that are not related to coaching and not related to AI. I was thinking, what's so silly? Why am I doing all this reading? He asked me to read human-computer interaction. Asked me to read positive psychology
Yeah.
journals. And then that purpose is to expand our thinking to go beyond so that if
Yeah.
a new research. So after 12 months, I realized what he's doing is good for me. But if you rely fully on AI, then we only use our knowledge that we if I have gone and just used the AI 12 months ago, the prompt I make and the prompt I'm making today will
Yeah.
be different. And
Yeah.
the prompt I'm making today is much better than the prompt I'm making 12 months ago, purely because my supervisor is wise enough to tell me, I know you're going to do this research with some tools, but I want you to do research on this one, that one, which initially I feel is irrelevant, but it's super relevant because it shaped my thinking to why I am thinking about today about the research question.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, I know in the Pandora's book, you raise a number of ethical issues about the use of AI. So I wonder if you could just explore that briefly for us.
So I think one of the key issues about AI now is, a few days ago, there was a leak about the shareholding of OpenAI,
Hmm.
and then realize and they and then they realized that a lot of the shares held by a foundation, and even the CEO Sam doesn't hold any shares. So what is happening now is the model is being trained by a limited group of people who have control over it. So they dictate, what sort of how they want the model to be trained
Yeah,
to what effect, and we do have no control over it. What does that then do is they will then affect the AI will then also affect how we think, because if they are more if they design they train the model to be more more Western centric, for example,
yeah,
then there's a certain bias to that. Or if you go into a Chinese model, the DeepSeek or something, they are training it in their in their cultural context as well and their biases. And if you use that, then you may get into that biases.
yeah.
So that's the second that's happening. So one of the reason why DeepSeek was said to be much more effective than ChatGPT is because it was trained on Chinese language,
Hmm.
because the Chinese language has more nuances. There's not directly, more nuances, more cultural thing, more nuances, and all that, and then that make the model more effective. Actually, in fact,
Right.
whereas ChatGPT is then trained on the English language, there's more restriction to language, so that causes it to have a certain problem. And so that's one. What are the biases? The two is like who is controlling the model to be learned, and the
Yeah,
third thing that I find quite interesting is in my book, I wrote about this World Economic Forum professor. I can't remember his name, but he came to Hong Kong, and on stage at the Asia Financial Forum, he says this. He's an AI scientist, and he says we are no longer training AI model, but we are breeding AI. So basically, scientists themselves, after they set up the model, and then as the model learn from iterations and all that, they no longer know what the model thinks.
yeah,
So basically, they somewhat also have lost control because now you're breeding this thing, and this
yes,
thing has a life of its own. And well, I think his name is Professor Russell Peter, and I was surprised to hear that from him because an eminent professor in AI from World Economic Forum is telling us that we are now breeding AI.
yeah,
So that also get another concern because then now your models are going forward, but then how do you know what is the model churning out? And and of course hallucination is one of those things, but what is the model looking at? What is the model trying to come up with? Where is it taking the data to generate the next thing for us? All these are question marks that we are not we are not able to ask as a normal user, so to speak. Yeah.
right. Okay, so finally, let's think about what advice would you give practitioners trying to set out for the first time to research their own practice?
I think for us, it's interesting because I think for me, uh, I would advise that if you can get a problem from practice
Mm.
into research, then that research becomes a much more uh, practical and interesting for you because you're solving an actual problem in practice. But now you're looking at the evidence and see how it turns out, and then it will then help you to solve the problem that you initially had. So that research become practical and become impactful.
Mm.
But if you begin with a research question and you try to fit into certain problem to be solved,
Yeah,
then that could be more. Then you may do something redundant because it's not required. But
yeah,
you come with a problem from practice, and then you do the research. Over time, it become a symbiosis thing because then the research will then inform your practice. How can you do better based on evidence?
mm,
And I think that's the best approach because I got interested in research because it begins like this. I'm asking, what
yeah,
if this can be done that way? But how do I know it will work? I need some data. I start reading the literature. And the second thing I will always propose as well is to start consuming literature, like what you always say, Peter. Is like,
yeah,
David, you always say that, you always advise people to consume the journals and the literature. I think that's important because then you're using the data first, or someone has already, like, maybe someone has already done the research, they came up with the evidence, and you're using that to back up your practice. And then over time, when you do that more, you realize how important it is, and you want to have your own research. And that's the motivation part, the intrinsic, motivation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ivan. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. I look forward to reading your next book and the one after that and the one after that.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just well. If you see, and I'm exploring opportunity to do some work around how we, collaborate as a team with an agent.
Mm,
And then if you see there's something that we can do together, we can probably put out something and see if there's companies that look at it. Because now, what I'm reading, what I'm finding on the market nowadays is a lot about productivity.
yeah.
So they're trying to bring in agents to reduce the work, but all these are just very simple things. There's like reductive work, how do you call that? Works that keeps recurring work. They're trying to get rid of that and throw it to the agent.
Mm,
But what I'm looking at is a psychology kind of a problem, right? Imagine if one day you have an agent, say, let's say for productivity, you brought in an agent into the
yeah.
finance department. All the backend accounting no longer, you need to let the agent do it. Now you need to interact with the agent,
Yeah.
and how that communication is going to work out.
Mm,
Um, and maybe I'm also doing some thinking here. What if we have an index for communication now? Now we always have communication skills, right? But it's for humans.
yeah.
Maybe the next communication index that we have is how do you communicate with an agent?
Yes.
Because these agents are now able to give you, they're not just taking instructions anymore. They can give you feedback. They can think, slowly they will tell you, no,
Mm,
you're wrong. Imagine agent tell you, okay, agent, I saw the finance figure here, and this is based. It should be $1 million. The
yeah.
agent can tell you, no, you're wrong because I'm looking at the data myself as an
Yes.
agent. You're wrong. How do you communicate with the agent?
Yeah.
So are you going to use a top-down approach? I'm your master agent. Go and recheck you get what I mean? It's interesting because I think now
Mm,
we're at the beginning of this very um, uh, interesting collaboration with agents.
yeah.
And if you're breeding an agent and you're bringing an agent to organization, then how are you going to communicate with it? How the team coaching is going to happen now? Imagine one day if a coach is doing team coaching, you cannot do a team coaching without an agent in your team because a lot of the back end was done by the agent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's an interesting challenge for our viewers to finish on. Thanks,
yeah,
Ivan.
yeah. Thank you so much, David.